So, welcome, Lukas, Lienhard. He has a background in philosophy and economics, but now decided to specialize in visualization of data and information. He works for a renowned media company in Switzerland, and he collaborates with a range of internal stakeholders from marketing, all fields of study and work. He is now going to talk to us about purpose, form, insight, and trust, reflections on how to craft dashboards that don't fail.
So I'm going to start a bit off topic at some point in 2005 when the internet embarked on this collective endeavor to uncover and document the truth about Chuck Norris in the form of these little, of course, satirical factoids. And I know and want to acknowledge that bad stuff has come out of this, and a lot of it, at least for me, is actually quite hard to read nowadays. But for the sake of some internet nostalgia, I'll give you a couple of examples. So Chuck Norris counted to infinity twice. Chuck Norris can burn paper with a magnifying glass at night. When Chuck Norris stands on Legos, the Legos cry. By now, I'm sure if you're all wondering, okay, but what happens if Chuck Norris designs a dashboard? So here you go. When Chuck Norris designs a dashboard, none of the users want to export the data to Excel. So I guess that's what my talk is about, how we can all be a bit more like Chuck Norris when designing dashboards. So we start with why many, or at least why many, if not most, dashboards fail. And I want to mention, I hope some of you disagree on what I'm saying, and then maybe we can discuss it afterwards. It's not set in stone. Why dashboards fail, how can we sign them so they don't, and what practical challenges we might face when actually trying to do this. And for me, there's a little bit of a personal puzzle involved, because I think even if I feel like I have a good sense of the theory part of it, the first two, I still find it struggling to put this in, or challenging to put this into practice. So that will be a topic as well. Now, you might be wondering, who's this person that is struggling to get dashboards right? So a couple of words about me. I'm Lukas Lienhard. I'm a data analyst at NZZ. It's a media company in Switzerland. Was already mentioned. I have a background in philosophy and economics. I'm passionate about uncovering actionable insights from data through analysis and visualization, and at NZZ I do this with closely collaborating with other people from within the company. And then on the more personal note, I can say that I used to have hobbies. Now I have a kid, like probably many other parents. No, it's very cute. It's not the newest picture, but yeah, very passionate about it. It's more like I used to have more time for hobbies. Now I also have a kid, and which is awesome. Although when preparing for the talk, I had to reconsider a bit. It's quite stressful. And I had this idea, this grand idea before my son was born of doing this data-informed birth card that was informed by work Nadia and Zan have published in Scientific American, and I still have not managed to do it, so. Good. Something else I want to get out of the way first. You might be wondering, or I had some discussions before, dashboards really, aren't we all a bit tired of dashboards? And I would say yes, but dashboards are still the most prevalent and probably the most asked for application of data visualization in many business contexts, and dashboards, if done right, still have a huge potential, I believe. So sometimes a dashboard really is not what is needed, but oftentimes a dashboard would be what is appropriate, but it's just not done right. And what is crucial, of course, is the done right. So my approach here will be to learn a bit more about how we can do dashboards right. We might have a look at why most dashboards fail. At least many, in my experience. And this is an expression I have borrowed from Nick Debra, who's also a speaker. I don't think he speaks about dashboards, but he has some amazing stuff. I'm going to quote him a bunch during the talk. And so, yeah, let's dive in. He has this expression where he says most dashboards fail, they're underused, they're tolerated rather than liked, or they're just altogether abandoned by the users that they were actually built for. And certainly in my experience, this has been the reality as well. And I think there are many specific reasons why dashboards fail. But what I'm interested in now in this talk is a bit more of a high-level framework that is applicable beyond the specifics. And I think of it, or I've come to think of it for now in terms of 4 dimensions. So purpose, form, insight, trust. And let's go through these in turn. First, yeah, to mention, they're, of course, like most things in life, they're very intertwined and interconnected, so not really separable, but I think as a framework, it works quite nice. Purpose. Dashboards fail because they have no clear enough purpose. That might be because they try to answer too many questions or not the relevant questions, too many needs or not the relevant needs. It might be because they're missing some key ingredients like a clear use case or problem to be solved, a clear goal that is to be achieved, or a stakeholder that has skin in the game that really needs the dashboard to do his or her work. Form. A dashboard might not be what is needed. I leave it at that here, more on it later. Insight. Dashboards fail because they do not contain tangible enough or easily accessible enough insights. And by accessible here, at least in this context, what I mean is as in the sense of being easily understood and appreciated, which can contain the larger accessibility as well. How they fail, relevant insight is either not there or not accessible enough. We can think of this in terms of the amount and kind of information, too little, too much, the wrong kind. Or we can also think of it as relevant information not being easily accessible, not obvious, or being altogether missing. Yeah. So trust also, dashboards fail because users have lost trust in the information displayed or have never even gained it. The data used is not or does not seem to be plausible, and the information displayed is incorrect or just misleading. Or it might just be missing or hidden. Hidden is an interesting one, because I would say that's when it takes too much effort of a user to extract the relevant information. So how can we design them so they don't? I would say it's basically the flip side of why they fail. And we can go through the dimensions again. So a clearly defined and focused purpose is what makes one part of a successful dashboard. It can be in terms of scope, needs, use cases, goals, problems, challenges. It's a bit difficult to capture, but it might help to ask specific questions like what problems do we want to solve, what questions do we want to answer, what challenges do we want to address, what goals do we want to achieve, and my personal favorite, and the one I torture my stakeholders with, any chance I can, is once we actually get the data, what can we do with it? What action can we base on it? And of course, the purpose is the very base of everything else. So based on the purpose, we can determine what kind of data we need in terms of metrics, sources, quality, frequency, etc. Absolutely crucial foundation, and then we can also determine what kind of form is appropriate. And the appropriate form here in this context means that, a dashboard is really what is useful, and that is not always the case. A little side note, I felt tempted to include, like, what is a dashboard really? Big discussion topic for a whole other talk. For here, I'll choose a bit of a narrow definition, where I say a dashboard is a visual display of data or information where some sort of metric or KPI is to be monitored, usually over time, and the data is dynamic, so it's continually updated in some sort of interval. And that roughly corresponds to, if you're familiar with this categorization that Nick Debra has proposed, it's sort of this over-category of dynamic data displays. Good. A dashboard is not always what is needed, right? A dashboard is only the appropriate form for a subset of use cases when we work with data, and different types or kinds of dashboard also might require different design approaches. Some alternatives. If you want to convincingly communicate results, specific insight of an analysis you have done, then probably something like data storytelling is the way to go. And I think one way I think of it is in terms of what Cole Nussbaumer Knaflic and team put out in these makeovers over at Storytelling with data, really. I'd love to do more of that stuff. Usually I don't have the time. I mean, if you have an interesting data set but don't really know what to do with it, exploratory analysis. And at least in my case, it's usually a different tool or a different approach than when I would design a dashboard. I just want or need to provide data in a form that can be worked with in Excel, yeah. Do a flat export of data. Usually not worth going to the trouble of building a dashboard in between, yeah. And if you need to provide data in some sort of automated flow as part of a product or workflow, then probably an API is more appropriate. And I'm sure there are many, many more use cases. So back to dashboards. I think dashboards are best suited in cases where data is dynamic, continually updated, there's some kind of metric to be monitored, and there is a stakeholder, at least one stakeholder, who really needs the data to continually achieve some kind of goals. Otherwise, it's not worth building. Dashboards succeed if they contain tangible, relevant, and accessible insight. And we can, one way to think about this is in terms of usefulness. A dashboard will be useful if users can get some insight from it, and the clearer and the more obvious the insight, the more useful the dashboard will be. And in both of these instances, it has to be connected to some sort of action, something the user can out of the dashboard that is relevant to them. So actionability. We can think of it in three broad categories for highlighting what is relevant, what requires attention. In some cases, there's no action required, and it's also nothing needs to be highlighted. Something can be actionably good, so it's so good that we want to do something about it, or the opposite, actionably bad. So bad that we need to do something about it. And at least to me, when I hear this, it sounds super obvious. But in practice, super difficult to implement with stakeholders. And Nick Deborah, again, has a couple of great articles where he goes into more depth on this 4 threshold method. And trust is also very simple in a way. Correct data reliably delivered. We can achieve this by building pipelines in a way that ensure data quality and maybe flag implausible values so that we can also give on the visual display for the user then a heads up. Practical challenges brings me back to this puzzle from the beginning, right? Why is this so difficult to implement, at least for me? I give you some of the reasons and then walk you through an example, a concrete example. And the reasons, when I started thinking about it, also for myself, surprisingly diverse, and not all have to do with working with dashboards specifically. So having the right data, the relevant data in a suitable format, adequate quality, is an indispensable prerequisite, and I'm sure, as most of you know, it can be hard and very time-consuming to get. Defining good metrics and KPIs, super difficult. Also, whole topic for another talk. Something completely other, like limited resources, crippling to the progress for dashboards and often leading to compromises that make dashboards fail. Use cases, interesting, at least for me. Often, my stakeholders, they don't know exactly what they want, and sometimes it's hard to find out together with them, even if we help them. And especially if we introduce new data, for example, say a new KPI or metric, we might simply lack the familiarity with it to tell what's good or not. So we have to analyze it first or wait some time to develop the experience. So the example, we are limited in time, so I walk you really briefly through it. It's about newsletters at NZZ, is a newspaper, right? We have these editorial newsletters, 28 of them currently. They feature prominently along the user journey. They generate a lot of data from across a lot of different systems. And when we started, it was really messy manual process for reporting the success of those newsletters. So what we did is we overdid the whole pipeline, added new metrics, better process for data quality, availability, etc. We had a monitoring dashboard, a strategic analysis, we had a one-time retrospective reporting, and a regular monthly reporting, which I'm now going to talk about. So it has the main part of it is some sort of KPI overview page, then you have trajectory pages and a documentation page. So a couple of improvements as compared to before. Data quality, much better. We had a clear purpose written on paper, so that was better what we wanted to do with the dashboard. And we also prominently placed it on the documentation page so that it's actually available to everyone who has a look at the dashboard. Based on that, we could really start designing around those goals. So the stakeholders wanted a one-page overview of the most relevant KPIs. They wanted the ability to spot current trends, the current status for a given newsletter, say the number of subscribers, but also the trends, how that developed over the last couple of months. And they wanted to have the ability to compare these metrics across newsletters and newsletter types. So I think this summary is actually quite good in that. So it's very neatly organized. It's easy to scan horizontally and vertically. Don't go to the details, so clear organization. We used row shading to facilitate horizontal comparisons. We included both numbers and visuals because stakeholders like the exact numbers, but the visuals are a lot better for comparing. Various other design improvements like showing both the underlying data and the aggregated metrics. And for example, this is interesting that these newsletters, they don't have all the same frequency. You see the upper newsletter is probably one that gets sent daily and the lower one maybe once a week. So if you aggregate the data, some information gets lost. For example, the variability here is higher, but it's higher only because there's less data. And so including this in the reporting really helps the stakeholder to be able to spot these things. And a shout out to San again for an amazing article on that topic, which I encourage you to read if you haven't. And also, I mean, you notice it, right? I just want to acknowledge it. It's so amazing, the Data Visualization Society, how it enables me and us, I think, to get all these inputs from different disciplines, etc. So I go through this quickly, providing context, including tooltips. So it's a static report, but some people have access to it interactively, so why not make it useful for them? And with that, the shortcomings. Again, Nick Debra, you see, he's a bit of the dashboarding hero for me. He once said, a dashboard should be boring with highlights. And if you look at what we produced here, I mean, it sure as hell is boring. No highlights. Unfortunately, I can say, okay, at least we managed the boring part, right? But seriously, no, it's not good, right? There's no clear indication what is relevant or requires attention. There's no clear definition, agreement, or understanding of what kind of actions or outcomes would be connected to specific values on the dashboard. Beyond something like maybe, yeah, we need to investigate further if there's a downward trend. As a missing link to the actual strategic goals, so and also we noticed that actually relevant data is missing once that link is established. So yeah, with that I already come to the concluding remarks. Most dashboards fail, but I believe they don't have to. So dashboards are still relevant, I think, despite what you might read. They're still the most prevalent and probably asked for application of data visualization in many business contexts. I still believe they have a huge potential if done right. Done right is the crucial part. So the next time you feel stuck with the dashboard, give it a try to ask yourself, does it have a clear purpose and focused purpose? Is the dashboard really what is needed in this context? What actions can be taken based on the information shown? And is what is relevant highlighted and obvious to the user? And is the information trustworthy and reliable? Yeah, and I would encourage you to be a bit more like Chuck Norris when crafting your dashboards. And if some people really want, or God forbid, need an Excel sheet, then don't go through the trouble of building them a dashboard for it. So thank you.
I'm afraid that with all the Chuck Norris talks, you might kind of go, I don't know, Chuck Norris here with the stage, so might just get 1 or 2 questions. So, who has questions? One there? Okay, a couple there. I don't think it's working.
Hello? Oh, hi. Thanks. That was a really great talk. So I work in UX design, and dashboards is definitely an area of interest for me. The last place I worked for was trying to implement, I guess, better dashboards. And an interesting kind of problem we kept having was almost like a back and forth was if the action that needs to be like highlighted or dealt with based on the result, if the analysis was smart enough to suggest what should be done by the human, the question became, well, why isn't it not just an automated process? And so I was just curious if you had thoughts on like when a dashboard no longer becomes a dashboard, when it just, yeah, like that kind of like area. If it's smart enough to tell you what you should do, then why is the human necessary at that point?
I don't know if I have a good answer for that, to be honest. I would say, I mean, if you look at a specific use case and you really discover that the dashboard already is has the answer, then I would say, yeah, dashboard is probably the wrong kind. Then you would try to implement some sort of workflow with APIs that automatically triggers the action or something. But I personally am not aware of many such cases, or I have a hard time imagining them currently. Because oftentimes it will be, even if you manage to include such an indicator, it will often be, okay, I have to investigate this further in my experience. So it will not, I mean, of course it would be the ideal case, right, if it would spit out a solution. But yeah, usually the world is messy a bit.
Why do you think that dashboards are so much used? Everyone outside the community uses dashboards a lot, and people, like you said, dashboards are boring. Why do we have this tendency of saying that if that's what the outside world knows us for?
I don't know, actually. I mean, maybe it's for me personally. Like I said it, like I was honest about it. Like I think I have this fairly clear vision of what a dashboard would look like ideally, but I've not managed yet to implement a real one, so that's kind of humbling. But I think it brings home the point a bit, because I mean, it's just super, in my opinion, it's just super hard to build a good dashboard. And so most dashboards are not built right for whatever reasons, and then they suck, yeah. And that's where they get the bad rap from, justifiably, yeah.
True. Do we have, yes?
We have online from Kaja Rosenblatt. Probably I pronounced that wrong, but sorry. Do you have any advice on how to discuss the use of dashboards with a customer who just wants a dashboard for the sake of having a dashboard?
I don't know. I think usually there is some sort of, I think it was mentioned before, right? Usually people have something they want, and it's a matter of finding out what it is. And I mean, maybe it seemed like I blamed stakeholders a bit. I don't want to blame stakeholders. I think oftentimes it's genuinely hard to analyze data in a way that produces an output that can be actually be used to base actions on. But so that's what I would encourage, like try to find out who the actual end users are and then getting in touch with them and discussing, maybe iteratively test a bit what might be useful for them. Because if you have to build a dashboard anyway, if that's the assignment, then you could at least try to build one that is useful. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. It was a very short Q&A, sorry.